In this video, we're going to go through and go backwards, and we're going to be given the equation of the circle for the most part, and then we're just going to identify some of the properties of that circle. So in these examples, we're going to write the equation in standard form if necessary. We're going to identify the center and radius of the circle. We're going to plot it on a Cartesian plane, and then we're going to give the domain of the range of the circle in interval notation. And just to remind us what the equation of the circle was, remember x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is going to be equal to r squared. Remember, the center is going to be h comma k, and the radius is going to be r. Okay, so radius is equal to r. And so in this equation that we're given, x minus 2 squared, y minus 1 squared is equal to 16, it's pretty obvious that h is going to be 2, and k is going to be equal to 1, and 16 is going to be r squared. And so if we take the square root of both sides, now technically r would be plus or minus 4, okay? But anytime we compute the equation of a circle, the radius should be greater than or equal to 0. In fact, it should just be greater than 0, otherwise the radius is just a point. So r is greater than or equal to 0. And so in this case, r would be 4. So if we go down here, the center of this circle is going to be 1, 2, and the radius is going to be 4. Okay, so if that doesn't make sense, just go rewind the video and just identify, oh, sorry, it should be 2, 1. Sorry, I went backwards from that. So this should be 2, 1. Okay, so that's 2 comma 1, and your radius is going to be 4. Okay, so if we plot this, so we go to the point 2, 1, which is going to be right here, and the radius is going to be 4. So essentially, to plot this, all you're going to do is just go up 4 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you're going to go left 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to go right 4 units. 2, 3, 4. And then finally down 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And then I'm going to do my best to draw a circle. A little bit tough, but I'll manage. Right. So that's our circle. Okay. Now we went through and we've identified the center and the radius. We've plotted it. Now let's find the domain and the range. Domain is all the x values, and it looks like the x values go from -2 to 6, and then it looks like the y values are going to go from, looks like right here, -3 to 5. Okay. Now that makes sense because if we look at it, the radius, so this is an r and this is an r, we have a radius of 4 and a radius of 4, so we should move up 8 units across the diameter. Okay, so the distance between this lowest point and this upper point on the circle should be 8, which is true because 5 minus and minus 3 is 8. And so for our range, or excuse me, our domain, that's going to be from -2 to 6 inclusive, and then from -3 to 5. Okay, so that's all we have to do. We're just dissecting this thing. Okay, keep in mind this is our equation. So let's move on to the next example. So we have x squared, y plus 3 quantity squared equals 1. And so in this example, think of x squared can be written as x minus 0 squared, and then y plus 3 squared equals 1. All right, and so we know that h in this example is going to be 0, k is going to be -3. All right, so notice this is a plus, and that could be thought of as y minus a -3 squared. All right, so all we're doing is to get the center is we just take the opposite of what's inside there. And so our radius r square is going to be 1. The square root of r squared equals the square root of 1. Now, technically, r is plus or minus 1, but remember, we only want the positive version of that. Okay, so now we have the center and the radius of this. Okay, so we know that our center is going to be the point 0, -3, and our radius is going to be 1. Okay, so let's plot those. So 0, -3 is down here, and the radius is going to be 1. So we have a point that goes up 1, left 1, down 1, right 1. And so we get a circle of radius 1. All right, otherwise known as the unit circle, okay, which we'll study in detail a little bit later in the course, but for right now, that's what we have. All right, notice that our domain is going to go from -1 to +1, inclusive. All right, so domain -1 to 1, and then our range goes from -4 to -2. That's our lowest and highest points. So hopefully that makes sense so far as to how we can go through and identify the key components given the equation of the circle. All right, now sometimes we're not given the equation. Okay, so let's take a look at an example such as x squared plus y squared minus 2x minus 4y plus 1 equals 0. So essentially what happened was somebody FOILed this out. Okay, and what we have to do is we have to be able to get to the original equation. All right, so here's the way we're going to do this. We're going to use something called completing the square. All right, and I'm going to illustrate this this method. So it's an algebraic technique. It's not too difficult, but it just requires, if you've never seen it before, it requires adding the right numbers to both sides to be able to get a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so what we're looking for is a perfect square trinomial to build those for both our x and y terms. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rearrange this equation. So I'm going to say x squared minus 2x, and I'm going to leave a space, okay? And then I'm going to say plus y squared minus 4y. I'm going to say plus over here and plus over here. I'm going to leave another space. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. All right, now here's where we complete. So that's the first thing you should do, is you should get all the x's next to each other, all the y's next to each other, and then any constant to the right-hand side. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the square by taking half of any of the linear terms and squaring it. Okay, so I'm going to take -2, which is the coefficient of the middle term. I'm going to divide that by 2, and I'm going to square that. Okay, so that's going to be -1 squared, which is equal to 1. So I'm going to add 1 to this side of the equation. To balance an equation, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with the y value. All right, and so that means I'm going to take half of the linear y term, the term that's just the first power, and I'm going to square it. Well, that's going to be the same as -2 squared, which ultimately turns into 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4 in this space. And again, whatever I do to one side, I better do to the other side. And so now what we end up with is we end up with this equation, x squared minus 2x plus 1 plus y squared minus 4y plus 4, and then -1 and +1 cancel out, so we're left with 4. Now what we're going to do is we are going to factor these perfect square trinomials. Okay, so what we have now is that each of these, so this is a perfect square trinomial. I'm just going to say PST, and this is a perfect square trinomial. And so what we can do is we can factor it. It's actually really easy to factor, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of x squared, okay? I'm going to take the square root of 1, and then whatever the sign is in the middle, I'm just going to bring that down, and I'm going to square that. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the y. Okay, so now this is going to become the square root of y squared. Okay, so square root, we're going to have the square root of 4, and then we're going to bring down the sign in the middle. Okay, so that's a minus, and we're going to square it. Now, the 4 is staying 4 on the right-hand side, so we don't do anything to that. Another way to write this would be x minus 1 squared plus y minus 2 square equals 4. All right. Now, of course, if you don't believe me, what you could do is you can FOIL this back out. I'm just going to FOIL this one back out just to illustrate, and then I'll erase it, and then we can finish the problem. So this would be y minus 2, y minus 2. If I FOIL it out, I get y squared minus 2y minus 2y plus 4. or y squared minus 4y plus 4, which is exactly what we had with our perfect square trinomial. Okay, so just illustrating that if you wanted to check the answer, you would just FOIL it back out. Okay, now regardless, what we have now is we have the equation of the circle written in standard form. Okay, so next thing we're going to do, identify h and identify k. Well, h is going to be 1, k is going to be 2, r squared is equal to 4. Taking the square root of both sides, r is equal to 2. All right, so when we go through and take care of this, we have the center at 1, 2, and we have a radius of 2. All right, so if we plot this on the circle, here's the center, 1, 2, and the radius is 2. So we go up 2, we go right 2, we go left 2, and then we go down 2. All right, and then here's our circle, again, as best as possible. And it's not a good one, but we'll just pretend that one's not too terrible. And so the domain for this is from -1, because that's the leftmost x coordinate, to 3. All right, so we have -1 to 3. And then the range is going to go from 0 to 4. Right. And so that takes care of everything. Okay, so if the circle is not written in standard form, we have to use this completing the square technique. Okay, so if you didn't understand that, make sure you rewind the video. Okay, make sure you watch it a few more times just to make sure you understand the process. Okay, and this is going to be a helpful technique for you all as we go throughout the remainder of the course. All right, so there's one more example, and if you want to try this one, you can pause the video, see if you can write it in standard form, and then identify this, the center and the radius, and then sketch it. I'm going to finish this one up in another video. So if you want to practice this one and then watch the next video to see if you got it correct, that'd probably be a good way to make sure you get some practice with this.